The Christmas party glittered like a polished lie, every surface reflecting light laughter and the careful illusion of happiness. Crystal chandeliers hung above the ballroom, scattering gold across silk dresses and black tuxedos, and a towering pine tree stood at the center of the hall, heavy with ornaments that looked expensive enough to feed a family for a year. A live orchestra played soft carols that drifted through the air like falling snow, and servers moved quietly among the guests with silver trays of champagne. It was the kind of party people photographed and remembered as perfect. And yet, near the edge of the room, standing beside a long table draped in white linen, Elena's heart was falling apart. Her hands trembled as she held the pen. The papers lay before her, neat and final, their sharp black text cutting through her chest with every line. Divorce agreement. The words blurred as tears welled in her eyes, and she bit her lip to keep from sobbing. She could feel the eyes of the room on her, though most guests pretended not to notice. They all knew something was happening. Scandal always hummed beneath wealth like electricity, but no one stepped closer. No one asked if she was all right. This was not that kind of party. Across the table stood her husband, soon to be her ex-husband, Mark Hart. Tall, handsome, and impeccably dressed, he looked every bit the successful man people believed him to be. His jaw was set in a line of restrained impatience, and he checked his watch as if she were late for a meeting rather than signing away a marriage. To him, this was a formality. To her, it felt like a funeral held in public. "Just sign it, Elena," Mark said quietly, his voice smooth, practiced. "We've talked about this. Let's not make a scene." A scene. The word stung, as if her tears were an inconvenience, as if the slow collapse of her life were something impolite. Elena swallowed hard. She remembered the early days of their marriage, the warmth in his eyes, the way he used to brush a strand of hair from her face and call her his miracle. Somewhere along the way, that man had disappeared, replaced by someone cold and ambitious, someone who measured love in appearances and advantage. She glanced around the room once more. Executives from Mark's company laughed near the bar. His parents stood close to the Christmas tree, whispering to each other, their faces stiff with approval. His friends smiled and sipped their drinks, relieved that the drama would soon be over. To them, Elena was just the quiet wife who had never quite fit into their world. They saw her as fragile, dependent, lucky to have married into money. None of them knew the truth. Her signature appeared on the page in a shaky scrawl. The moment the pen lifted, something inside her cracked open. Tears spilled freely now, sliding down her cheeks, and she pressed a hand to her mouth to stifle a sound. Mark reached forward, took the papers, and gave a small nod, as if a business deal had closed successfully. "Thank you," he said. "I'll have my lawyer finalize everything after the holidays." After the holidays, as if Christmas were just another item on a calendar, not the night her marriage ended in front of 100 strangers. Elena turned away before he could say anything else. She moved through the crowd, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor, every step an effort. No one stopped her. No one followed. By the time she reached the balcony doors, her chest ached from holding back sobs. She pushed them open and stepped into the cold night air, welcoming the sting against her flushed skin. Snow fell gently outside, blanketing the city in white. From above, the lights looked peaceful, almost kind. Elena leaned against the railing and finally let herself cry, silent tears shaking her shoulders. She thought of the years she had spent shrinking herself to fit into Mark's life, hiding parts of who she was, believing love meant sacrifice. She thought of the secret she had carried so carefully, the truth she had never spoken aloud in this room. No one knew she was a billionaire's daughter. No one knew that the quiet woman they pitied controlled assets larger than the entire company Mark ran. She had chosen anonymity, chosen love over legacy, and now she stood alone on a balcony, freshly divorced. Her heart broken but her name still hidden. A memory surfaced, unbidden, her father's voice calm and steady, warning her years ago that money changed people, that power revealed truths love could not hide forever. She had argued then, insisted that Mark was different, that their love was real. Her father had not pushed. He had simply told her that if she ever needed him, truly needed him, he would be there. Elena wiped her face and straightened her back. The cold air cleared her mind. Tonight had taken something from her, but it had also given her something unexpected, a clarity she had been avoiding for years. She was no longer bound by a marriage built on misunderstanding and silence. She was free even if freedom hurt. Behind her, the party continued. laughter spilling out every time the doors opened. Inside, Mark was likely accepting sympathetic glances, playing the role of the composed man moving on. Let him. Let them all believe whatever story was easiest. The truth would come in its own time. Elena took one last look at the city below and whispered a quiet promise to herself. This would not be the end of her story. It would be the beginning, whether anyone in that glittering room was ready for it or not. The morning after the party arrived with a pale winter sun and a silence Elena had not felt in years. She woke in the guest room of the house she had once shared with Mark. The walls bare where her own photographs had never been allowed to hang. For a moment, confusion washed over her, and then memory settled heavily in her chest. The papers, the tears, the balcony. It was over. She dressed simply, choosing comfort over elegance, and moved through the house like a ghost. Mark had already left, his side of the bed untouched, his schedule relentless as ever. On the kitchen counter lay a neatly folded note informing her that movers would arrive in the afternoon to collect her things, efficient, final. Elena smiled sadly and poured herself a cup of coffee. She had expected anger, maybe bitterness, but what she felt instead was a strange calm. The decision had been made. The pretending was finished. For the first time since her wedding day, she did not have to hide. By noon, she was gone. Her suitcase rested beside her in the back seat as her car rolled through the gates and onto the open road. She did not look back. There was nothing left to see. The building she arrived at an hour later rose quietly above the river, its glass facade reflecting the winter sky. There was no sign announcing its significance, no flashing logos or grand displays. To the world, it was just another office tower. To Elena, it was home. As she stepped inside, the security guard straightened immediately. "Welcome back, Ms. Alvarez," he said respectfully, using her real name for the first time in years. Elena nodded, emotion catching briefly in her throat. "Thank you." The elevator carried her to the top floor where her father waited. Alejandro Alvarez, founder of one of the largest private investment firms in the world, stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back. His hair had gone silver since she last lived here, but his presence was as solid as ever. When he turned and saw her, his composed expression softened. "You came," he said simply. "I did," Elena replied. Her voice broke, and in 2 strides he was beside her, pulling her into a firm embrace. She rested her forehead against his chest, the familiar scent of his cologne grounding her, and let herself cry again, this time without shame. They sat together for a long time, speaking quietly. She told him everything, the slow unraveling of her marriage, the loneliness, the moment at the Christmas party when she realized she had nothing left to prove. Alejandro listened without interruption, his jaw tightening only once when she described signing the papers in public. "I never wanted you to suffer," he said at last. "I know," Elena answered, "but I needed to learn." In the weeks that followed, the world shifted. Elena stepped back into the role she had once set aside, not as a symbol or an heiress, but as a leader. She took meetings, reviewed portfolios, and made decisions that moved markets. Confidence returned to her posture, strength to her voice. Those who worked with her quickly realized she was not living in her father's shadow. She was standing firmly in her own light. News, as it always did, found its way out. A business article mentioned her name in passing. Another followed, then another. Whispers turned into headlines. The woman who had quietly divorced at a Christmas party was not just a CEO's discarded wife. She was a billionaire in her own right. Mark read the news in his office one morning, coffee growing cold in his hand. The photograph showed Elena standing beside her father, composed and radiant, her eyes clear and unafraid. For the first time, doubt pierced his certainty. He replayed moments from their marriage, her restraint, her generosity, her silence, and understood too late that he had never truly known her. An invitation arrived weeks later, embossed and formal, announcing a charity gala hosted by the Alvarez Foundation. Mark attended out of obligation and curiosity, his confidence carefully rebuilt. When Elena entered the room, conversation paused. She wore a simple black dress, elegant and powerful, and when she spoke, people listened. Their eyes met briefly across the room. There was no anger in hers, no bitterness, only calm acknowledgement. She inclined her head politely as she would to any acquaintance and turned away. In that moment, Mark realized the depth of what he had lost, not in wealth or status, but in respect. As the evening unfolded, Elena stood on a small stage and spoke about resilience. about choosing integrity over appearances, about quiet strength. The applause that followed was sincere and overwhelming. She felt something settle into place inside her, a final piece aligning. Later, as she stepped outside into the cool night, snow drifting gently around her, Elena smiled. The pain had not vanished, but it no longer defined her. She had signed divorce papers in tears at a Christmas party, believing she was losing everything. In truth, she had been reclaiming herself, and this time the world knew exactly who she was.